Hot Springs Village Inside Out is a closer look at the greatness of Hot Springs Village, Arkansas and the surrounding areas. People, places, experiences. Hot Springs Village is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host Dennis Simpson as we engage in weekly conversations to explore Hot Springs Village Inside Out. Today's show is brought to you by Central Arkansas's favorite radio station, KVRE. Find them on the dial at 92.9 FM. Stream them live at kvre.com. Today's show is brought to you by RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village. The award-winning RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village is the largest real estate office inside the village with over 30 full-time agents and support staff. Visit them to learn more about this beautiful place to solve your real estate needs. Call them at 1-800-364-9007. Find them online at explorehsv.com. They are RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village at 1-800-364-9007 or online at explorehsv.com. HSV Inside Out is also brought to you by Ike Eisenhower State Farm. Ike and his award-winning team have been serving the insurance needs of folks all around Hot Springs Village since 1998. Ike has qualified for State Farm's President's Club, Chairman's Circle, and Hot Springs Village Insurance Agent of the Year. Call Ike Eisenhower State Farm today at 501-984-4100. That's 501-984-4100. Find them online at ikeeisenhower.net. Call them today for all your insurance needs because, like a good neighbor, Ike Eisenhower State Farm is there.
See Brian up and among the living again.
I'm living, yes.
So in May you had a pretty big heart attack.
Well, didn't have a heart attack, just had a lot of clogged arteries and things. I had 6 bypasses.
6 bypasses?
6.
So
I was trying for the record.
They use like liquid plumber or what do they do?
Yeah, super glue.
Super.
Yeah. And then I had a valve replacement and a valve repair at the same. It was a 6-hour surgery. So
I say this on the radio a lot, and people just kind of whatever. Yeah. If we knew how little time we had left, we'd be living our lives differently.
Absolutely, I'm very blessed. I'm doing well, and
that's fantastic.
It's just amazing surgeon. His name was Thurston Bauer.
Thurston Bauer.
Thurston Bauer. I was Thurston Howell.
I'm about to say, you don't have a lot of Thurstons these days. Thurstons are not, yeah.
Right.
And this was in Little Rock?
CHI St. Vincent, Little Rock.
Really?
Yes, and then I did 36 physical therapy sessions at Baptist.
Okay, before this, would you have considered yourself a healthy person?
Pretty healthy, but I was really addicted to sugar. So I think sugar was killing me. I was drinking lots of Dr. Peppers. Growing up in Dallas area, I had to drink Dr. Pepper and lots of ice cream, things like that. And I just really wasn't eating right. Too much good Southern food, fried food. Too many chicken fried steaks.
Too much comfort in the comfort food.
Too many rolls at Texas Roadhouse, things like that.
Or at the home plate.
The home plate, yes. Too many. But I can eat in moderation now, but the doctor thought really the sugar contributed to a lot of the cholesterol and the clogged arteries. So, yeah.
For what it's worth,
yes.
If there are some of you out there that go, addicted to sugar.
Yeah, right.
I encourage you to look up the 1796 riots in London, where the sugar. Have you ever heard this?
I have not. No.
They were importing chocolate, and everybody, the cacao, the chocolate was very, very popular.
Yes.
And they would have the ship with cacao would come in, and the ship with sugar would come in, and they would make it in a confectionery, and the ship that had the sugar on it did not make it, and they actually had riots in the streets.
Oh.
I'm telling you, people, you're more addicted to sugar than you think you are. You say, well, it really doesn't affect me. Yeah, it does.
I think my wife would be rioting if there was no chocolate. Sorry, Deanne. I was just joking.
What's the problem? More chocolate. More chocolate. Well, anyway, the reason we're coming back to you today is because you have a great little podcast that really caught my eye. Tell me about it. What do you do?
Sure, I call it the Medicare Funcast.
Funcast, huh?
Right. I talk about Medicare, which you can skip. I always say you can skip that if Medicare's no interest to you. But I try to use, I have a broadcasting background, so I try.
And a broadcasting voice. KLAZ?
KLEZ, yes.
B98.5, KLEZ.
Right.
It was before that. But
That's
yeah, go ahead.
right. Yeah, so I worked various places around the country, and so I combine, my current Medicare sales, Medicare expertise with my radio background. So I interview some, old connections and things like that. Like I do a show on the author of a book about the Beatles. And you know this, my friend is Denny Tedesco. His father was Tommy Tedesco, who was a famous session musician. And Denny did the movie called The Wrecking Crew, and he has a movie out called Immediate Family, which is about all the Laurel Canyon studio musicians, like in the early 70s, like the Eagles, James Taylor, that type of thing. So Immediate Family is a great movie.
So if you've never heard it put together, and I know you know
Yes.
this too, but one of the things you touch on, excuse me, you think about the Laurel Canyon. Well, most people know the Laurel Canyon for Helter Skelter and what was the...
Yeah, Charles Manson.
For Charles
right?
Manson.
Yes, right.
Charles Manson actually worked with the Beach Boys and was pissed off because they didn't pick him to be in their band.
Yeah, right.
Let that change the opinion of the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys plus the mass murderer. Who knows? But it's all that group is so entwined. On my radio show the other day, I was talking about how there was a lady named Miss Linda Ronstadt.
Yes.
And Linda Ronstadt was this fantastic singer, had just broken away from Trick Pony, I think it was, or Wild Ponies. And she went out on her own and started a private band.
Right.
And there was this guy named Fry and Henley,
yes.
who happened to be the Eagles,
right?
Who happened to live the floor above a guy who would wake up in the mornings and play this old rotten piano. That's because he could only afford a basement apartment,
right? And
his name was Jackson Brown.
Yes.
So you could throw a blanket over all these people, and they're just right there together. Now, tell me more about the Wrecking Crew, because how did the name? You remember how the name was formed?
Hal Blaine, who was the famous drummer, who was on like 5,000 famous songs. Hal Blaine said that some people told him, the old school musicians, like from the big band era, they were the suit and tie guys, came in and did studio work for Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby. And these young kind of more hippie-ish guys, kind of hipsters, late 50s, early 60s, this new rock and roll was coming in, and these old school guys said these young guys are going to wreck the music industry.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, the new guys weren't necessarily union; the old guys were.
Right.
And another thing was, and put this in perspective, people. You've heard of the BBC in London, right?
The BBC.
The BBC from the Beeb, as they call it. The Beeb. So the BBC broadcasters. Radio, remember? Radio.
Yes.
The BBC broadcasters would show up every morning in tuxedos with bow ties to stand in front of a microphone that no one could see. Well, these guys that were the old crew, they would show up in jackets and ties, and
absolutely.
It was a job. It was official to them.
Yes.
I saw a picture with the Wrecking Crew the other day. One guy was playing a flute, like who was the old rock band that did the flute?
Jethro Tull.
Jethro Tull.
Jethro Tull, right?
And he was playing the flute in the studio without a shirt. So there was a little
little
bit of difference between how they viewed the world.
Yes.
But tell me more about this documentary and the Wrecking Crew.
Oh, it's fantastic. Came out. It's probably been 14, 15 years now, but it's available, on a lot of the streaming services and all that. But I became friends with Denny Tedesco. His father, Tommy Tedesco, played on just about anything in the 60s, in early 70s. He's a guitarist on the Bonanza, dun 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 dun. Dun. He did the Adams.
The funky and the funky.
Yeah, he did that song. He did the Green Acres guitar, dun 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 dun, And then he worked with the Monkees. He played on Beach Boys songs. He played on, B.J. Thomas, Frank Sinatra.
Really?
I mean, like anything in the 60s.
Yeah.
People don't realize that, like Herman's Hermits, all these, it wasn't them. It was, the vocalist on the song.
Right.
But it was the Wrecking Crew that played on, they did the drums, the guitar, the piano on all these songs. The Monkees could play their own instruments because they went out on tour. Yeah. But these studio musicians came in and with, they
just slayed it.
They would knock out a song in 10 minutes or half an hour. Yeah. It's not that some of these musicians like the Association or these could not play.
Right.
But they would say, okay, we need your vocals. Go and do the vocals. We'll take care of the rest.
Yeah. For economy's sake.
Absolutely.
You know, and
yeah.
The Monkees initially started as kind of a pop band, like typically the Archies. They didn't really play instruments, but they wanted to, so they worked on it where they could play their own instruments. We don't have time for you to learn at $150 an hour in the 60s in the studio.
Very expensive, yes.
Let's just bring these guys in, do the background. You guys can kind of plunk on it when you're live.
Right.
But for right now, let's do this. And you might call the Wrecking Crew, you might call them kind of the house band.
They pretty much were.
Is that a fair way to put it?
It is. And you know, Tommy Tedesco, he was, you know, have a guitar will travel. He had several guitars in his trunk, and he would have in the movie, you see this in my podcast.
Your Funcast.
My Medicare Funcast.
Medicare Funcast.
Wrecking Crew with Denny Tedesco. Denny tells a lot of anecdotes in the one interview I did with him, where, you know, his father Tommy would have like 5 different guitars in the trunk of his car, and he was on call. He had several, like 3 phone lines into their house that he would pick up. You know, be like 3 different phone lines from different studios.
So you never got a busy signal?
Oh yeah, he would pick it up. Hey, we need a guitar on this Glenn Campbell song or something. You know,
right there.
Can you be there? Oh yeah, I'll be there. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And they lived near Hollywood there in kind of the Burbank area. Yeah. And Tommy, his dad, was on call. You know, he may do a soundtrack. They may say, hey, we've got the Godfather movie. We need some guitar. We've got a TV show. And then a lot of times a song never made it. You know, they didn't know if the song would make it or not. They just would go in the studio. It may be some unknown person that never would have a hit.
Right.
But then they would play on a Beach Boys song that, you know, became Good Vibrations or something. You know, they never knew what that song was going to do.
So about two little jokes here real quick. Right. You know, Diane told me the other day that she was a Monkees fan. And I'm like, a Monkees fan? What? And I turned, and then I saw her face. Anyway, you'll have to pick that one up later. But
okay,
yeah. But the Medicare Funcast is a great concept. It really
Well, thank you.
Everything what you're watching right now, everything has to have a little bit of sponsorship. And I was going to mention this in the first show we did. It's funny. Everybody here in the village has probably a half dozen hats. You know, you do work on the radio. You do the Medicare. You do the podcast, the Funcast. We all have a little bit different hats.
Yes.
So I wanted to kind of take a moment to spotlight that.
Right.
What do you think you want to do on the Funcast next?
Probably do some more interviews with some, you know, neat people, some authors, maybe some semi-famous people, that type of thing. In my broadcast business, I met a lot of people and still kind of keep in touch with some, you know, people that may have been in some old TV shows and things like that, and just interesting people. Like I interviewed the guy, like I said, the guy that did a book on the Beatles. And that's one of my first interviews. I did an interview with, of course, Denny Tedesco, things like that. And also interviewed a guy named Jody Dean, who I worked with in Dallas. He worked at KVIL Radio, if you ever heard of Ron Chapman and all that.
Oh, duh.
So I actually worked at KVIL. It's one of my first jobs in Dallas.
Yeah.
And so I interviewed Jody Dean, who, if anybody's from Dallas, Texas area,
they know
they know Jody Dean. And I did an interview with him in March, which is a lot of fun. And even if you don't know Jody Dean, if you like radio, when radio was king and all that, it's just a fun interview. So I want to continue to do that and providing people Medicare information. Again, if you're not into that, you can skip to, I'm going to do some type of fun interview, that just my heart situation kind of slowed me down. So I do want to get back into the Medicare Funcast, but it's on all the, Spotify, and you could find it in any of the, outlets there for podcasts. So.
Well, now let's go back to the Beatles just for a minute. And one of the things I'm pretty sure I know this detail. I was thinking, oh my goodness, there's a Blink, Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell, written a bunch of books.
Right.
He's kind of the guru of common sense in this day and age.
Right.
Because he talks about how he went to a Canadian college, got as great an education as he would have at Harvard or anyplace else.
Sure.
He just didn't make those connections.
Right.
But he makes brilliant connections, and he talks about the the 10,000 hour rule. Have you ever heard this?
I don't know. I have
The
not.
10,000 hour rule, and he applied it to Condoleezza Rice,
Okay.
which we all think of Secretary of State,
Yes.
lovely black lady, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah. She also was a concert pianist.
Never
a
knew that.
Magnificent pianist.
Yes.
And he talked about how
Yes.
she got her 10,000 hours in.
Right.
Okay, so Brian, think of the jobs, and you and I both,
Right.
that we've had in the last 40 years.
Yeah,
45
you've had
years.
interesting background too. Absolutely.
A little bit of everywhere.
Right.
But all that said, if you have 10,000 hours, which there's 2,000 hours in a work year,
Yes.
5 years,
Yes.
at the end of 5 years, there's very few things people show you that you haven't seen.
Right.
After you were doing Medicare coverage, I'm sure after the 6th or 7th year, you're like, kind of seen this, kind of been there, kind of done that, right?
Oh yeah. Not to interrupt you. We have one Medicare Funcast. I brought some of my friends together. I brought one friend that does the same thing I do in Medicare sales, another guy pharmaceutical sales, and we did funny sales calls.
Oh my Lord.
So we did a show on funny sales calls, and there's just some.
What number was that? It was like number 1 or 2 or 3 or 4?
It was last February, February this year or so. But it's called Funny Sales Calls.
Oh
So that's a good one because there's some bizarre stuff I've run into. My friend, his name is Dotson. He ran into some bizarre things, and we go into people's homes, so you see a lot of various situations,
real world,
and you too.
Real world events,
but they're fun.
Well, the reason why I was coming up with the 10,000 hours,
yes,
is because, and you know more about this probably than I do. I was driving as I was listening,
right?
But he talks about the Beatles had 10,000 hours before they walked in the studio. That they had practiced in German bars.
Oh yes,
and that they
paid their dues.
Yeah, they paid their dues, and
they
were paid in beer, accommodations, and food.
Right.
They didn't make money, but they were able to. But they would play 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 times a day.
They did. They learned how to be in front of an audience and how to perform and how to be a tight band and how to interact and then their charisma. How to be a public figure. Because they were. They had charm.
They did.
Like George Martin, that's what he wasn't impressed at first with their musicianship. He loved their charm and their humor, and he said, "Yeah, we can do something with them." Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a big discussion as to whether or not they would use him or not.
Right.
One of the biggest producers in the world at the time, and they were like,
and again, a suit and tie guy too.
Yeah,
he was right.
Exactly.
He was used to producing classical music and things in Britain, right?
Yeah.
The symphonies.
And it's funny you should say we see those things as they evolve and change.
Right.
I use the analogy here for In the Village. When I started coming here 24 years ago,
right.
Every song on the radio at KVRE was big band, swing, bop, or something like that.
That's right.
It's changed ever so slightly,
It
just
has.
a little. Now, it may need to change a lot more soon, but that said,
Is there Guns N' Roses yet?
There's not Guns N' Roses, but there's a Jewish knockoff group called Guns N' Noses. But I didn't know if you'd heard about that one.
Never heard of them.
There's a Hispanic band called Nacho Mamas. Anyway, I digress.
You're making me hungry. Nachos. You gonna cook some nachos for me here? No,
I'm not cooking for you. We're going to home plate.
Okay.
Are you kidding?
Home plate's the best.
Oh,
it's great.
It's awesome. It may not be the best thing for my heart, but hey,
that's right. It's
my heart loves
good
it. How about
comfort
that?
food. Right?
It is good. And I'll tell you this. We'll end on this real quick. I think one of the things that we know, you talk about sugar and we talk about the other. The answer is moderation.
It is.
If you eat fried food 3 times a day, it's a matter of time.
Right. I went to a wedding Saturday. I did have some cake, so it was delicious. But can't do that, 3 times a day.
No,
so,
you can't walk around with an IV in your arm for saccharin or whatever for sugar. Dennis Simpson with my good friend, Mr. Brian Kulis.
Thank you, Dennis.
Remember to check out the Funcast. Where can we find that? Any
Medicare Funcast on YouTube and all the wherever you get your podcast. It's all over the place.
We're going to put it under the bottom here in the lower third.
Thank
Brian,
you.
great seeing you again.
Thank you, Dennis. Awesome.
Pleasure. Talk to you next time.
Thanks for watching and listening to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a weekly podcast starring Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Visit the website at hotspringsvillageinsideout.com.